Yo, 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 what's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of Thrive and Dive, thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. The purpose of this show is to have people on that I think are thriving in life. And as we dive into their stories or topics where they have some expertise in, we hope you too can thrive in your life. And I'm joined today with my good friend, Rohan. Rohan is back in the house. He is no stranger to Thrive and Dive. He's been here before, and if you have not listened to his testimony episode, I'm going to pin it right here. So take a second and pause this episode and watch this episode with Rohan so you can get a greater picture of who Rohan is and why he's worthy, in my opinion, to be on Thrive and Dive. Because, Rohan,
thank you.
I do feel you are thriving. And with that being said, Rohan, how are you doing today?
Oh, absolutely brilliant. I've had a couple of weeks to just rest and relax and hang out with all my good people. And yeah, so can't complain.
Love it. So just for a little bit of context, a little bit of timeline, when me and Rohan filmed the episode of his testimony, not shortly after that, you left for Amsterdam, Netherlands, and I think you were there for 2 months, and you're back now for maybe it's been a month since you've been back, or a little longer?
A little over a month, but yeah, it's still pretty new from when I came back. Yeah.
Awesome. So before we jump into our topic of conversation, just give us a quick like 30-second recap of your time in Amsterdam. Remind the listeners, I don't know if we ever told them why you're going there, but if we did, remind them what you're up to over there in Amsterdam.
Okay, so every summer, my company, I work for an airline, flies a couple of airplanes out to Amsterdam, and we operate airplanes for an airline out of Amsterdam, just based out of Amsterdam, fly all over Europe. So I got an opportunity to do it, couldn't say no, and I was there for 2 months. It was fun.
An opportunity you couldn't refuse.
Nope, not at all.
And that's awesome. And I think I've already told you this before, but Amsterdam is a place I would love to go to one day. I don't have a huge bucket list of places I want to go. I mean, I don't mind traveling, but I'm not like, I got to go to all these places. But Netherlands specifically, that's my country, not a birth, but the place I was born is owned by the Netherlands. So the island's called Curaçao, part of the Netherlands Antilles.
Yes.
Yeah, so
I
Netherlands
did not know that.
Yeah, there you go. So
Cool.
Netherlands is my team in terms of international soccer. And so one day I want to go there. So glad it was a good time. So Thrive and Divers, we're going to jump into our topic of conversation. Today is not a testimonial, but it is a topic. And Rohan, I want you to prep the listeners here because you might have clicked this and the whole topic of finance and money. You're like, what is this about? Is this going to be a snooze fest talking about money and bills and investments and 401ks and things that go over my head personally, right? So I want you to grip the listeners right now because your listeners, you've listened this far. Bravo. Let's go. Rohan, why, just before we jump into the meat of the content, why should the listeners continue listening to this episode about finances?
Okay, so basically everything that I'm going to share with you today, everything that you're going to ask me probably, I don't know what you're going to ask me, but overall, I don't have a PhD or any kind of formal knowledge about finance. Everything that I'm going to talk about is something that I tested the waters, and God's blessed me with it. And I just want to share that with everybody else because what I do is very basic. It's free. And anybody can do it. So if you just...
No special promo code after this?
Nope, not at all. So unless someone ever does that for me in the future, but no. No one's sponsoring me right now.
No, it's a professional Rohan class or Rohan Plus compared to Ramsey Plus, which maybe we'll talk about in a second. But okay.
None of the above, but really. So it's very basic. And if everybody does that, you could at least... I'm not saying it's beneficial. It's going to be beneficial to everybody. I know it's worked for me, and I just hope that maybe sharing this will help someone out there to help better their finances.
That's awesome. So humility right out of the gate. Rohan is not an expert in the sense of like he studied finance, where that's where he got his degree, and that's where he makes his money and is living his career. No, you're a pilot, a successful pilot, from what I hear in terms of what you do. But this is a passion of yours. Something you've personally dived into. You've seen as not just a utility, because I think everybody needs to have a grip of their finances, but you go even the extra mile. Like if you were compared with me, I think I have a grip of my finances, but I'm not sitting here like dying to talk about it or learn more on my own unless it might be beneficial for me and my future family. But it sounds like you're on the second level, if you will, of this is a passion of yours, right? Like podcasting to me is a passion I do on the side. I'm not a professional podcaster. You guys know that. but I enjoy doing it. For you, it seems like finance is also a passion of yours in a similar way, but a different topic. So my first question, or I guess my second question now, is why is this such a big passion of yours? Are you just a numbers guy from the get-go? That's always been your thing? Or what has motivated you to be inclined to study this topic on your own time, right? No one's making you do this. No one is forcing your hand to do this. But what gives you that passion?
Okay, a couple of things. So I'm not a numbers guy. Fun fact, I don't know if I should be saying this, but all the way till high school, I used to get zeros in math. Like that's how bad I was in math.
There you go.
And then I'm like, no, I need to become a pilot. So I need to do better. So I worked hard, made it happen, got through school. So yeah, I'm not a math guy. I'm not a numbers guy. But my thing with why finance became such a passion is because I was actually very selfish with money. It was always like I was frugal to the point where I did not want to give. I didn't want to share my money. Everything that I got, I was like, okay, I got to be very careful with how I spend that money. And that is not what God teaches us. And I think through that learning, I realized that finance and saving money is not just about you living frugally, but it's also about you giving and being generous and just all of the above. But we can go dig deeper into that. But that's pretty much the basics of how I got into the true aspect or the true meaning of budgeting and saving and finance.
Awesome. So with that being said, where in your story, I think you kind of already shared it, but where in the story do you realize that, oh my goodness, this is maybe crippling me a little bit, like I'm not living to my full potential? Because a lot of times finances are the reason somebody doesn't pursue a passion or excel or thrive, in the sense of thrive and life in this life. And you even mentioned a little bit that you were a selfish person. I mean, we're all selfish. I'm not trying to pick on you, Rohan.
No, yeah.
But in terms of your finances, and I could even share a little bit of my story about how that has always been kind of a trait that's followed me, more of a flaw, not a trait. Trait are usually good things. But when was that moment where you're like, all right, I want to be free from the grip of money? Did you ever battle intensely with money being an idol that you worship? And then how did that kind of propel you to where you are now?
Yeah, I think the more you talk about it, I think I did make money an idol in terms of, because I grew up in a poorer family. So for me, every time I got a little bit more, same thing as a student, I didn't have a lot of money. So when I started making any kind of money, I was like, okay, I got to be careful and protect every single dime that I have. And I made that too much of a focus in my life, and I forgot about everything else. So that was one thing. And then, believe it or not, there has been, so it's part of my testimony too, but it's the time when I released and I was like, okay, I have no control. My expenditure right now is going way above how much is coming in. And that was outside of my control. That's when I was like, God, you just have to, this is your money. This is not mine. This is something you blessed me with. So you have to control this. And believe it or not, that was like 3 months. I didn't look in my bank account, and now I know, but back then I had no idea how, but I didn't lose a single dime. The amount that I had in my savings, and I thought that money was coming out, and 3 months not being employed, coming back, looking at my bank account, and it was still the same amount. I'm like, that's a shock. I don't want to deal with this, because I'm like, okay, this is a gift from God. And afterwards, it was still a gift from God. I found out that I got a bonus from work, even though I wasn't working. There was some money that they owed me that they didn't give me. But again, I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, awesome.
I think that came about because I just trusted that God's going to provide.
That's awesome. So let's go ahead and start there. I mean, we've already started multiple times already, but like, let's go ahead and push into this theological framework, if you will.
Yeah.
And then I want to spend the majority of the rest of our time talking about the application, some like hands-on ways that people are listening can tangibly take what you've said and apply to their lives. So this might be more of a question you would ask me, because I'm, I guess, more of the theology guy. If finance is your passion, theology is probably more my passion. But I want to hear your take. Yeah. And I can add some commentary if I feel led to do so. But we Thrive and Divers, Thrive and Dive, we hold to a biblical worldview. Every topic we discuss here, we want to interpret through the lens of what the Bible says. The Bible is authoritative and inerrant. It's trustworthy and true. And I can get into a whole nother episode talking about why it's trustworthy and true, authoritative, and something that should be listened to. So for you, Rohan, talk to me about what, in your experience, what the Bible says about money and what God says about money, and maybe even clear up maybe some misconceptions about money in terms of like, is it okay to have it? Biblically speaking, is there a way to have it without it having you and anything of that nature?
Yeah, so you can back me up on this.
Yeah,
sure. And give, I guess, more of a context behind stuff I'm gonna say. But one is the Levitical law, if you may, the giving 10% to the church. You can explain that more. So that's one. The other thing is I actually have that in my notes. For 1 Corinthians 9, 6, 7, and 8, but more 7 and 8 says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So I think that's the biggest thing that I can take out of finance and how God tells us to deal with money is it's more of something that he has blessed us with. Mm-hmm. So that means if he's giving us something, we can give in return to those who don't have. And I think a big part of finance is you letting go a lot. It's funny. There's this quote that the richer you get, the selfisher you get. Because the more money you get, the more you don't want to let that go. And I'm trying to be very careful because it's happened in the past where I've been like that, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to work on making sure that I don't do that. So if I'm getting money, I make sure that I'm sharing that with the people who need it. So I have, my dad runs, it's again, we talked about this in our previous conversation on this podcast, but my dad has a ministry back in India. So a lot of the money that I get, I give it back to them because those kids, they need this money more than I do. God's given me more than I specifically need right now at this moment. I'm being very smart about how much I spend, including the charity that I'm giving, but I'm not giving. If that makes any sense. So,
no, makes total sense.
So that's where I'm at.
That's good. So you mentioned the Levitical practice of tithing for those of you guys who are maybe new to Scripture and this idea of giving towards the church. Maybe you've grown up with pre-understanding that the church is always out to give my money. The church is just all they care about my soul, but really they care maybe a little bit more about my money. It feels like, right? Always talking about it or whatever. And I work at a church, so I get that. And even before working at a church, I felt that sometimes. But in the Old Testament, just for some biblical context, God required the Israelites during the Old Testament covenant to give 10% of what they had to give towards the Levites, who were the priests, because the Levites and priests didn't have like jobs. They were in charge of the sacrificial system, the tabernacle, the temple, and in order for them to be provided for, everyone would give 10% to the work of the Lord in that sense. And now as we cross over from the Old Testament to the New Testament, though the tithe is not in the New Testament, and you can make a good argument for that, it is a great type of what giving should look like in the New Testament. It's a good marker. Like for me, I give 10%, right? That's where I feel the Lord has me. Sometimes I give more. Sometimes I give less. It's just it's not like a threshold that you have to follow, but there's a lot of parallels between the priests in the Old Testament and pastors and those in ministry in the New Testament. We don't have priests anymore because the Levitical law, the Mosaic law, is no longer under obligation to that, and there's no more sacrifices since Jesus was our ultimate sacrifice. But the pastors still work for the Lord, and there's some variations on this about should a pastor be bivocational, making his ends meet somewhere else and then serving the Lord, or should it be full-time ministry? And we're not here to debate that right now. But you quoted scripture in 1 Corinthians 9, and if you give cheerfully. And actually earlier in that chapter, Paul talks about the rights apostles and pastors have to make money. He quotes actually a text from the Pentateuch where it talks about don't muzzle the ox as it's treading. And basically what he's saying is don't have your pastors basically be handcuffed financially when they're trying to serve the Lord. Like help a brother out, And but then Paul talks about how I gave up my right to earn money from you guys because I didn't want to be a stumbling block. So there are some ministries, some people that are like, no, we got to be bivocational. We shouldn't be. It's not obligatory for people to give. And this becomes obviously a very touchy subject because whenever we talk about money, it can get so weird sometimes because money is the quickest way to know what's on the throne of our hearts. Yeah. Money is the biggest tool. Like, well, where's your heart? Well, let's see where your money's at, right? It's usually a good external demonstration of what's driving you internally. So anyway, great scripture references. Use them in great context, Rohan. That was good. Question for you before, again, we dive into maybe more of the logistics of this. Yeah. And this is maybe a little bit more of an unscripted question because me and Rohan talked a little bit about this beforehand. And if this is too personal, shoot me down. We'll cut this out of this segment. Okay. But you talk about how you're generous, right? And in the sense of the Lord compels you to give.
Not entirely. I'm working on it.
I'm working on it. But like you're doing it seems like a good job. Not though we can always grow, but you're in a spot right now where you're you're holding open-handedly from what seems like, right? Yeah. And this is where you can let me know if we get too personal. Okay. I let you in the door to my building today, and you were driving a very cool car, right? So for some people they're like, oh, if you're ministry minded, why are you driving a Mustang, right? Okay. Boom, right. So for you, what do you think is that balance of no, Christians can have nice things and still give generously. It's not an either or type scenario. And that's just one example, right? Maybe you're gifted the car for all I know, right? It's like, I don't know your story with that. But explain that maybe a little bit for those listening.
I think you answered that question, that Christians, I think that's a wrong mentality to have. And I had that in the past too. There were times when I would see a pastor up on stage with a gold chain or with a nice fancy watch, and automatically I would start judging him before he even started speaking on the pulpit. And that was something that was wrong with me, because again, as you said, you never know. Was he gifted that gold chain? Was he gifted that watch? Or this is a watch that he wanted forever and he saved for the last 15 years to make that happen? You don't know the backstory behind what happened, so you cannot judge somebody. And then God is still speaking through him on that pulpit. So whether he's wearing a Rolex or he's wearing nothing, hopefully some clothes, but but it shouldn't matter because God can still speak through him. So that being said, yes, I do own a Mustang, and I have other worldly possessions that I'm very proud of owning, because as I said, I have worked very hard towards getting these things. A Mustang was my dream car since I was a young kid. And when I started, and so backstory, I didn't have, when I first came to the US for the first year, I didn't even have a car. Yeah. I was relying on other people to drive me around, to now getting to a stage in my life where I've been blessed with a job that provides me more than what I need. And I can save enough to get this. So, since we're talking about finance, everything that I own, I paid out of pocket. So I made sure that I'm debt free. So the only debt that I have right now is my house, which even that, my plan is in the next couple of years to pay it off. Wow. So I am able to give, but I'm also able to enjoy all the hard work that I'm putting in for myself. Yeah. If that makes sense.
I think that's super important for you guys to hear, because I think there's this false dichotomy that you're either, very frugal, giving towards the Lord. You can't enjoy the things, the work of your hands in a sense. So you give away everything or you consume everything. It's like either you get all the things, get all the worldly possessions, be materialistic, or be an animist, which is someone who's super spiritual, and you don't have the material possessions, and there's no like in between. It's like, I think I think God gives you passions and that are like beyond just maybe your calling, right? Like for me, teaching and preaching is like my calling, but I have some passions as well, right? Even something as simple, I've already referenced this podcast, right? It's not cheap getting the equipment for this, right? Some of it's for my work, but some of it's my own personal stuff, right? Yeah. You could make the same argument, but like, why do you have this? Obviously, when you get in the comparison game, it's gonna gets hard, and I think that's not the point. But if the person in their heart feel like they are, walking by the Spirit, because that is a big piece of giving, guys. It's very Spirit led. Rohan might be compelled to give X amount of dollars towards this ministry for this period of time. For me, I did not sense that urge, that calling. who's right, who's wrong. We're both right. As long as we're both walking by the Spirit, and we have that close communion with Him, I think the Spirit will convict us if it's like, you know what, James, I like how you enjoyed that, but I think you're enjoying it a little too much, right?
Yeah.
Because usually that's what idolatry is. It's a good thing that we turn into a God thing. It's not like a blatantly pagan thing. Like having a Mustang isn't sinful. Like what? No.
Yeah.
So it's like,
And it's not as expensive as you think it is.
yeah, true. There you go. I like it. So with that being said, let's jump into the more practical side, like you've already said.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of let you decide where you want to start with this, if you don't mind, because
Yeah.
I don't want to knock you off your groove with a question that was totally unrelated to the previous thing you wanted to say. So is it cool if we run that course?
Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to start off with this example that you gave about giving versus how much can you take and how much you should get, even if you're ministry minded, right?
Yeah.
So let's take the Mustang, for example, or let's take you guys giving versus how much are you keeping. So let's say, for example, right, you're giving 10%.
Yeah.
Let's take even you're feeling extra generous and you give 20%.
Mm-hmm.
If you look statistically, you still have 80% of your entire salary up for grabs that Jesus says, do what you may with it, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, because you have the 20%, 30%, you still have 70%. Now, that's where the smartness comes in. You give the 10, 20, 30%, how much ever you want to give.
Yeah.
And then you have the rest of the 70%. How are you using that 70%?
Yeah.
If I'm taking that 70% and spending that entire 70% on buying my Mustang, that's where the problem's at, okay? Because now I'm not saving. I'm not thinking about my future. I'm not thinking about the present.
Yeah.
Those are issues that come in. Now, out of the 70%, if I'm like, okay, I'm going to save 5%, 65% is going to go into spending, and I'm going to just save 5% every single month. That 5% is going to add up. And in the next year or 2 years, depending on how much you make, you can afford a Mustang.
Right.
So even, forget about a pilot, even a guy who works at Chick-fil-A making minimum wage can afford to buy a Mustang by still giving their 10, 15, 20%, how much ever they want to give. So you can give, you can save, and still live accordingly within means, and still enjoy a good life. So it's all about smart, critical decision making when it comes to the money that you have. So that's where I go into, and I think the biggest thing that I have noticed has helped me is budgeting. And as lame and boring as that sounds, guys, trust me, it helps so much. So there's two parts of budgeting. One is your expenditure budgeting, and then the other side is your savings. And you can spread those out. The way I do it, again, as I said, everything is free. I have a Mac, and they have a budget app on Numbers, I believe is the app.
Okay. Yeah.
They have a free budget thing. That's what I use. That's what I've always used, and it's worked great for me. So you open that budget, it gives you a section of, okay, auto, food, utilities, travel, entertainment, whatever it is, right? It's all broken down into different categories. So first thing you need to see is, okay, let's take, for example, you're making, let's make it easy, $2,000 a month. And I'm going with small numbers here. This is not practical, but just for the sake of understanding. $2,000 a month, right? Out of the $2,000, I know my rent might be $200 or let's say $400, right? That is, you can't do anything about it. That $400 is going to go away every single month. Utilities, you don't know how much your utilities is going to be. But on an average, let's say you're spending $60 a month on utilities. I am not going to take $60. I'm going to go conservative. I'm going to go more restrictive, and I'll put $100 there. Because what ends up happening is you spend that $60, you still have $40 that's extra that's left for savings.
Right.
So in terms of that, you just go through your expenditure, put in the numbers, go more restrictive on those numbers, and then next thing you know, out of the $2,000, first you look at your expenditure, all the required items. Netflix is not a required item. Spotify is not a required item. If you cannot afford it, don't get it. Right? Wait till you're making $10 more an hour. Then you can be like, okay, now I can afford Spotify. Or now I can afford Apple TV or whatever it is, right? Don't go, first look at your necessary items. Mark those down. and then go into, okay, now do I have extra money to spend? Then you can start looking at all the fun stuff, cool stuff that you look at. But once you have that, let's say you're spending 1,000, you can save 1,000. Or let's say you end up spending 1,500 and you save the rest, the 500 goes into your savings, right?
Yeah.
So there should be, no matter how much you make a month, you can always, there's always savings. There's always times, there's always means for you to save. So your expenditure, whatever it may be, every month should be below your total expenditure. If it's 1,500, once you mark everything down, and it's easy to do that. Just go in, if you use credit cards, just go into your credit card and go to your statement, your transaction history, and then get everything at the end. And that's how I do it. I wait till the end of the month, and I'll go sit in a coffee shop, open my credit history, and just go down the list and type all that in.
Yeah.
And once you do that, the app on its own will calculate all of that and give you your total expenditure.
Yeah, so I know what it means, but for those who are younger, we got some high schoolers. Any high schoolers in the house listening to this? I'm proud of you for listening this far, because this is going to see you well. When you say your expenditure, you're talking about things that you spend, right?
Correct.
All the not what you're bringing in, what you're expenditure.
Yeah. So sorry if some of this is you can make it simpler or simplify this whole thing.
Yep.
But so your two different budgets, expenditures one, $1,500.
Yep.
Then you go into your savings. So how do you look at your savings? If you're making $2,000, $1,500 is your expenditure, and now you say, okay, I'm going to give $100 every month, or $200 if you want to do the 10%. $200 every month I'm going to give to the church, or I'm going to give to charity, or whatever. You can still save the rest of the money, which is probably going to be about $300, right? And that ends up becoming, expenditure plus what you give is technically an expenditure. Then you total that up, and then you subtract that from the total you make for that month.
Yep.
And then you end up saving.
Yep.
If there's a month you end up, you don't save, that's something that you need to look into and see where you went too far.
Yeah.
And don't be scared. Like if, for example, your travel expenditure might be $200 a month. There might be 1 month you might end up spending $300. That's okay. As long as your total expenditure, which is $1,500, that's what you set as your limit. As long as you stay within that goal, you're okay. You might end up having an auto bill that ends up being a lot.
Yeah.
Right? 1 month where your car breaks down, whatever. Or you have to spend more on gas. That's okay. The big thing about finance is everybody gets anxious. Right? And that's when people start breaking down. Don't be anxious. Again, going biblically, God's going to provide. If there's 1 month you end up spending too much and you don't end up saving at all, that's okay. Just move on to the next month and try to do better for the next month.
Yeah.
So that's the big goal with your savings. And then now going back into the savings, let's say you're saving $300 a month, right? That $300, spread that out. Have 3 different savings accounts. Now, guys, there's a lot of banks out there that give you a good interest rate on your savings. Okay, so there's bank accounts. You have your checking account.
Yep.
And then you have your savings account, right? Take only the amount that you need on a day-to-day basis or maybe for a month. Have that in your checking.
Yep.
Everything else should be in your savings. And there are some savings that can give you all the way up to 5-6% on the money that you have. So the more money you have in your savings, the more you're accruing. This is free money. That's the big thing. The banks, retirement, whatever, we can talk about all that stuff, but like all of that is going to give you free money if you know how to use them properly.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, there's profits for the banks as well when you do that, but it also helps you out in the long run. So take your money, put it in a savings account. You don't have to touch it. You don't want to touch it. Just whatever's in your checking, consider that your expenditure money, right?
Yep.
And then just go from there. So
awesome. I want to pause you right there.
Go
I
ahead.
don't know if you're switching gears at all. Something just to kind of recap what Rohan is saying here with the expenditures in your saving account. Even going back to the example he gave with his Mustang, right? And how anybody could purchase a Mustang or something of that value if you have the long-term goal in mind. So here's the thing, Rohan, and this is where I learned maybe the hard way in high school and high school is a great place to learn the hard way, right? You're not on your own yet. But the things you want in life, you've got to understand that. You've got to already have that kind of planned out. You can't live day to day and expect the great things to happen to you just willy-nilly. No, for you, going back to your Mustang, you have a dream, a goal to get a Mustang. That's been your dream car. So you're thinking about that in the future. It's kind of like I don't play chess, but I imagine it's like this based on what I hear chess players. Do you play chess at all?
Yeah, a little bit.
But you got to anticipate what's coming. You've got to plan ahead. So when you're thinking of maybe taking that dream vacation or you want to travel and things of that nature, you're talking about, you set aside $200 a month for that traveling purpose. That takes self-control and discipline. But if you don't even know what you want to do, you're not going to have the self-control to save, right? So if you don't already have it predetermined in your heart that, I hope to maybe get married one day. So maybe I should start saving towards my ring or something. Or I want to go to on this trip one day. Maybe I should start saving. It's a long game. Because unless you win the lottery or get a job that gives you a lot of money really quickly, it's a patience thing. Am I willing to wait? Am I willing to say no to the small inclinations that would satisfy my instant gratification and play the long game and do something that I can actually afford?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, because I think that's the biggest thing about finance is discipline, right? Yeah. It's just having the willpower that, okay, I need to save and not go out and eat every single night. Mm-hmm. There was a time when, as I said, I wasn't making a lot of money, and I was able to restrict my expenditure to $1,000 a month, including rent and all the other expenditures that I had. It is possible. It's hard work. It's a lot of determination and a lot of diligence to go in and do that, but it's possible.
Right. But if you don't have that dream or that goal in mind, you're not going to be as disciplined. Because discipline is the best definition I've heard of discipline is remembering what you want most, right? And we settle for things we want least, and then we never get what we want most because we never had that plan to begin with. But anyway, back to what you were chatting about.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think the big thing is debt-free for keeps. That's what I'm going to say. A lot of Americans, especially, they think having a credit card is free money. Guys, it's not free money. It's money that you're given as a loan, and you have to pay it off. And you don't want to wait. The way credit cards get you is they'll say, hey, you can only pay back 10% or 20% every single month. The rest you can pay back at a later time. What ends up happening is that keeps racking up. And then next thing you know, you're $50,000 in debt. And I'm not joking. There's a lot of people who are way more in debt just because they just waited and waited and waited, saying that I'll get to this at a later time. Yeah. Also, the fact that the more it sits there, the more interest that comes on. So it's more money that you have to pay at the end. So always, whenever you swipe that credit card, look at it as money that, okay, do I have this money? Can I afford it? If you can, swipe the credit card, and at the end of the month or whenever you can remember, just go pay it off.
Yeah.
In the US, it is a big deal. Having a good credit score is huge. You don't have a good credit score, you're not going to get anything. So good credit score happens by just, okay, I'm just going to have auto pay on, or at the end of every month, just go in and pay whatever I have.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let it sit around. So having debt, that's the big thing, is do not get yourself into a position where you're in debt. Same thing like I told you about the Mustang. I'm sure there's a lot of kids out there that want a Mustang, that want a motorcycle, that want something cool. Go ahead and do it. No problems with that. But the problem is like, oh, I'll get this Mustang, but I'm going to be spending $500, $600 a month on the interest and on the loan, and then that's how I'll get this Mustang. No, if that's what you end up doing, you're putting yourself, you're wasting a lot of money on that Mustang. A Mustang, a car, motorcycle, anything like that is depreciating. The value depreciates. So the first thing you need to look at, if you can, because it's a hard thing to do, but the first thing you want to do is buy a house. That is a great example of investing, right? It's simple investing. It's an asset that stays with you. Even if, let's say, a storm comes and wrecks your house, you still own that property. You still own that piece of land, right? So that value is always going to keep going up. whereas a car's value is going to just keep going down.
Right.
So ideally, if you can afford it, if you can make it happen, buy a house. Because what ends up happening is it's through rent that people just, it's wasted money. I had to do that for the longest time. I couldn't afford a house, so I just paid money for rent. What ends up happening, that's $800, $900 that you could have been putting into your mortgage, just going out in thin air. You're paying somebody else to get rid of their mortgage, but you're not getting any. That money's never coming back.
Right.
Same thing with leasing a car. Do not ever lease a car. It's like one of my biggest pet peeves because there's so many people who do that.
I lease my cars, and I'm like,
I'm like, really, that car you lease? No, I'm kidding. No, but seriously, a lot of people, they're like, oh, it's cheaper to lease a car than to loan a car. I would rather you take out a loan and get a car that and pay a little bit more than you leasing a car. It's the same thing as renting. You pay that money and you're not going to own that car at the end of the lease or at the end of the lease.
Yeah.
It goes back to them unless you buy it. They ask for a lot of money, so you end up wasting a lot of money. That's where people lose money, is because they just waste money. And like we were talking about a couple days ago about return on investment. Everything that you buy should have, look at the ROI, look at the return on investment, see what you're getting in return. Some things are very expensive, but what are you getting in return? The Mustang is way more expensive than me getting a Toyota or a Honda, right?
Yep.
But what did I get in return? I got my dream car in return, right? Something that I love. I've had this car for 2 years, has given me zero problems because I bought it almost brand new from a trusted source.
Straight cash?
Straight cash.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
But that, from the moment I wanted this car to actually buying this car, it took me 2 years. I didn't just go out and do it.
Right.
It was 1 year of research.
Decision.
Yeah, it was not. It was 2 years of prayer, saying that, God, I really want this, but please let this be a good decision.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of prayer. I always pray over my cars because I've seen a lot of people, like, they either total their car or they end up buying a car that totals itself.
Yeah.
So that I'm like, God, please, like, as soon as I get in the car, I like put my hand over it and I'm like, God, please.
Oil put some incense in it or something.
Something like that.
But no, my parents are always big on that. When we get a new car, a new used car, it's like, we're praying over this guy. It's more of like a dedication. I dedicate this to the Lord.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that's a bad thing. You know, you're just saying like, hey, God, thank you. Thank you for blessing me with this amazing thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you don't want to take advantage of it, right? So I'm very blessed with the stuff that I have, but again, it's just like, make sure that you're being smart about the decisions that you do. Live within your means.
Yeah.
Don't buy something that you cannot afford because your peers are pressuring you to do that, right?
Yep.
A lot of times you'll see a friend owning something or a bunch of friends owning something and you're like, I want that too, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes you go in and do that. And guess what? They probably could afford it either because their parents gifted it to them or something of that nature, but you ended up spending all of your money and now you've got nothing. So live within your means, be debt-free.
I think the biggest way you can live within your means, and you already mentioned the food component, the amount of money I've put towards food is ridiculous, especially in high school. I'm like, where'd all my money go? Oh, yeah, I ate out every day.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is clothes. Those I feel like are the two biggest things that steal living out of our means. And in terms of like small like increments, right? Sometimes we think, oh, I didn't make a big $500 purchase, so I'm living in my means. But those like daily 20, 30, 40, 50, even $100 increments of things you really don't need. Clothes, you know, I'm all for style. Maybe that's your passion. And if that's your case, that's something totally different. But if you're dressing to impress, if you're doing that, that's one of the biggest ways I think people live outside their means is trying to keep up.
I agree. But like, that's the thing. If you want fashion, go for it. But you don't need to go buy Prada or Louis Vuitton or whatever else out there. You can go to a thrift store, right? You can go on Amazon. I still, I've been, even with the work that I do, I still go on Amazon and I look for the cheapest clothes to buy.
Nice.
Might not be the best thing because my dressing style is not that great. But
we might be the best spokesperson for this. I'm not. I don't claim to be a swaggy or whatever the term is. Good with clothes.
I'm not good about that. Like, till today, I have not spent more than $80 on shoes.
Okay, yeah.
But I have I still have Nike. I've got all the different brands. I just wait for them to go on sale.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
like it
patient.
still works,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And, for me, that works. But then I end up spending a lot of money on cars.
Right. But I just wanted to give an example of how to live on your means. It's cutting out those little daily decisions. Again, it's not like always the big whomp and like, oh, I made a decision not to go on vacation this year. Look at me living in my means. Okay, that's great. But like, what are you doing daily? What does that daily discipline look like? Yeah. Can I switch gears, or are you still going with this one?
Oh no, yeah, please.
Yeah, talk to us about. This is maybe gets a little more technical for you young folks because this is something that I learned maybe only 2 or 3 years ago. But talk to me about 401ks, Roth IRAs, investing for
the next thing.
Next thing. Look at that. Perfect.
So guys, I know you might think, oh, I'm just 18, 19, 17, 20, whatever your age might be. You might be thinking, I've got plenty of time before I retire. But guess what? You don't. You're already too late. The faster you can start saving for your retirement, the better it is. Now, yes, I know you don't want to plan 5, 10, 30 years down the road. You don't know if you're going to live that long, blah, blah, blah. There's all that kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, if you can start saving right now, statistically speaking, you would probably end up living up until your retirement.
Yep.
Right? On an average, most people do. So theoretically speaking, you are going to get to that stage. You're going to get to the age of 65 or 70. And there's people out there, if you are good and smart with your money, you could even retire at the age of 45, 50. And it's not that hard to do. If you start saving for your retirement at the age of 18 or 19, you could end up easily retiring by 45 or 50 if you're making even in the low six figures. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take a lot. I'm not saying everybody makes six figures, but in this day and age, there's a lot more people who do make six figures than who don't, right? So even if you're in your upper 80s, 90s, and then you go into the six figures, you could save enough to retire by the age of 45, 50, 55, and then enjoy the rest of your life. Not have to think about money at all. And that starts now. The more time you wait, the longer that's going to take. And I'll tell you why. Because this is free money coming in. It's not you saving money. It's just money that comes to you. So if you have a job, or if you can get a job that has a 401k, that's perfect, right? Even if they match 1%, 2%, 3%, that is more than enough. That is 3% more money from the amount of money that you're putting in. That's 3% free cash that's coming into your account, right? Yes, you can't touch that till you retire, but again, as I said, free money. So if you have a 401k, guys, start that right away. That was my fault. I did not do that. When I first started, I had no idea about 401k. I'm like, why do I want to save up for retirement? I'm going to wait. I'm going to rather take that 3% and use it now and save it now.
Right. It's that short-term mentality versus the long-term mentality.
Correct. Yeah. And I made a mistake. I started way too late. I started my 401k when I was 23, and it was 5 years too late, in my opinion. Yeah. I probably lost close to $500,000. Wow. Just by those 5 years. Yeah. So I think that is very important.
Yeah, because when it comes to 401k, it's like, at least my financial planner dude talked to me like time is more important than honestly the compound interest that happens when you start early. Like you can start when you're 40 and maybe even put more money in than me when I started when I was 23. And you're never gonna maybe catch me because I have longer longevity,
exactly,
where money's working for itself.
Yeah,
doesn't make sense to me in my mind. I'm like, all right, I guess it does make sense. So I'm thankful I started. 5 years too late in the sense of like, I've been good to start in 18. And some of you guys don't even know. Maybe no one's talking to you about this type of stuff, and that's why I'm glad you're listening to this. And you can do some research now about how I can start a 401k. Maybe the place where you work has that 3% matching, which would be awesome. But
but here's the con about 401k. If you don't get a match, it ends up not being that beneficial. So that's the difference between a 401k and a Roth IRA.
Okay. Yeah. Dive into some more. Yeah.
Yeah. So an IRA is an individual retirement account. So it is something that you are It has nothing to do with your company. It has nothing to do with where you work. It's just something that you're telling the government that, hey, I am going to save this much money, the government, the bank, that I'm going to save this much money every single month, and that's going to go straight towards retirement. The good thing about IRA is there's no time penalty. So if for some reason you have to take that money out, there's no penalty on it. Whereas a 401k, there's if you take it out before you retire, then there's a significant penalty there.
Okay.
A Roth IRA is after tax. So now you can be like, oh, I don't know what the tax rate's going to be 30, 40 years down the road when I retire. But if you look historically, tax rates, doesn't matter what government is in office, statistically, historically, 30 years prior, the tax rates were a lot lower than it is now. So that is what's going to happen in the future too. The tax rates now is a lot lower than it will be 30, 40 years from now. So,
yeah. So with Roth IRAs, your money's being taxed on the front end, but not on the back end, or is the opposite? Okay.
Yeah. So you're going to get taxed today, but then you won't get taxed when you're pulling out the money at 65.
401k is you don't get taxed putting in, but you're going to get taxed pulling out.
But the reason 401k is better is because your company's giving you free money.
Right. If that's in your case.
Correct.
Yeah.
It ends up working out. But that's what I'm saying. If you don't, if your company's not giving you anything and you're just going to just put into a 401k, you're getting taxed 30, 40 years from now. That could potentially, historically speaking, be higher.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you end up losing a little bit of money. So,
gotcha.
That's a couple, again, as I said, I don't know finance really well. These are the two things that I do know.
Yeah.
Because I have accounts in both. There was a time when my company did not match 401k. So I was like, all right, I'm going to stop my 401k, leave that as is, and then start a Roth IRA. So I did that.
So you have both?
I have both.
Okay,
and then that IRA, I pretty much stopped. I still have my money in there.
Yeah.
I stopped that. And now I'm working towards, because my company's matching again.
Gotcha.
So now I've started my 401k back up.
Gotcha.
So retirement.
You just pick it up
important.
where you left off?
Yeah. So it's separate accounts, but they all end up merging together.
Gotcha.
You can transfer it from one company. That's another question people ask is like, hey, what if I switch companies? What's going to happen to my 401k? Nothing. It's still there.
Yeah.
That's your money.
Right.
No one can touch that. So all you have to do is go into that bank and say, hey, my company switched. This is where I'm going, and they'll do all the transfer stuff for you. So it's all easy and chill.
Sweet. Yeah, and that's already happened with me. Switching over. So
cool.
It's easy. Yeah. Good. Awesome.
So.
Great. Any other thoughts on this conversation? I know this could be a lot to take in for those of you who are listening, but hopefully you got a good overview of just the topic of finance from a biblical worldview, and then seeing some practical implications for your personal life as well. But anything else you want to add to this, Rohan?
No, just I want to highlight that, guys, just live within your means. Try to be debt free as much as possible. It's not always possible, but try your best to get to that stage, and just save. Even if it's $5 a month, that goes a long way. Have that savings. Be big on saving money. I think that will go a long way in the future. Because one thing that I didn't bring up, and you guys should all do, is have an emergency fund. Don't just save to buy a Mustang. Don't just save to buy something cool. But out of that $300 that you're saving every month, maybe take $50 out every single month to go in and put it into a separate savings account or a separate account, and make that your emergency fund. Yeah. Because you never know what could happen and when you might need that money. So have that emergency fund separate.
That's
that
good.
Makes sense.
And that's biblical. Because I think sometimes there's people, I'm not trying to point fingers at like, oh, just trust in God, don't have a backup plan. God will provide, just like he provides for the sparrows. And that is true. But one of the ways he provides is through your wisdom, right? If you're saying here like,
true.
Oh, no, I have no money. Why isn't God providing? Well, what'd you do to save, bro? You can't pin this on God because you didn't live in wisdom. That's not appropriate there. So so hopefully guys, you saw the benefits of this. I think a last charge for me from what Rohan says is to not be so impulsive, right? We all may want things, desire things, but if you can show some restraint, show some discipline, delay gratification, it's going to serve you well in the future. And then also don't be anxious. I think that was kind of more of a minor point we talked about at the beginning, that God is going to help you in this, right? But it's a cooperative effort. He's going to help you, but you also got to do your part and be wise. Check your banking statements, right? Sometimes I know for me, when I feel like I'm financially not in a good place, I'm like, if I don't look at it, it's just going to be fine. It's like, I'm not going to look at it. It's probably good, right? No, look at it. And then one last driving point to land this plane is, everything you have is the Lord's. I think you know this, Rohan. I'm not like I'm correcting what you said. But even we talk about your 10% or whatever percentage the Lord puts on your heart to give towards the church or whatever. That other 90%, though, is not directly going to missions or to the church. It's still the Lord's at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to glorify God through that. So going back to even the example that we've already mentioned multiple times, Rohan's Mustang, right? He's going to use that to the glory of God. It's not Rohan's Mustang. It's a Mustang that God has entrusted to Rohan, that God's giving him some of the desires of his heart, right?
Absolutely.
And now he's going to be a blessing with that. What that looks like, I don't know. He still hasn't offered a ride yet to me with it. I've yet to be in a Mustang.
Sorry, that's not for you.
Yeah, not for me. Yeah. So that's a big thing. It's all about the outlook, right? And again, money, like I said earlier, is one of the quickest ways we can know what our heart orientation's like, right? My hope and prayer is that the Lord is on the throne of your heart, and that money doesn't become a god. Nothing wrong with having money, but talks about how money, you can't serve both God and money. And if you're not careful, the money that you have will start to have you. So just be mindful of that. But thank you, Rohan, so much for your words of wisdom. And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We'll definitely have you on again, bro. It's been a treat.
Thanks.
Well, guys, this is Thrive and Dive. Thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. Have a great rest of your day.